Hello, I'm Richard Raffan. I recently bought what I know will be quite good tools because I can read the names on the handles, but the tools themselves are very rusty. They came out of an estate sale, and what you're going to see in this video is how I clean them up and then reshape them and sharpen them. What I have are Sorby and Marples tools. Marples, the name. So this is a relatively modern one, probably bought within the last 20 years. I also have a much older Marples, which is at least the 1960s, might even be the 50s, and not very good condition. It won't be high-speed steel, whereas this one probably is. I won't know until I've cleaned it up. And I have a Sorby, and this is high-speed steel. It says so on it, and I can read the Sorby name. The same with this. This is these are both, in fact, half-inch spindle gouges, and I also have a Sorby bowl gouge, which is in pretty poor condition, really, but again, high-speed steel. I can see it written on. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just take them to one of these Nylex brushes, and that's going to go into the headstock. So to Morse taper, I'll ram it in. Right, so I'm going to start with the worst looking one. I've got this running fairly fast. The idea is just to get the worst of the muck off. It's coming up quite nicely. It's looking a lot cleaner. And I can't see any indication that this is high-speed steel, so I won't really get a better idea until I see what colour the sparks are. Next we'll have a go at the antique. So this is an old style spindle gouge. An old style long and strong spindle gouge. It's got a it's pretty thick, fairly shallow flute. The sort of thing you'd use if you were doing large spindle work. These days I will put a longer left wing on it, have an asymmetric grind, and it'll work very nicely for roughing the outside of the bowls, as well as all the spindle work stuff. Already beginning to look a bit better. Just try and get a bit more of the rust out there. This is the Sorby half-inch spindle gouge, and it's got a non-Sorby handle on it, which isn't straight, isn't on the same axis as the tool. So I'm going to take this off the handle and return the handle because it's a nice piece of West Australian she oak. And I'm quite happy to have the tool off center, but it's just a bit large for my hand, so I'm going to return that. And that I'll hand sand in a minute. Get the bowl gouge done. So basically sand them. This is an old bit of 320 grit. And I can fold it up and get it into the flute. It's not very good on this one side of the flute. So it's a little bit pitted, but that doesn't really matter too much here. But it would be nice to get the flute inside polished, so it's really smooth and shiny. And to do that, I'm probably going to have to find a buffing wheel. In fact, not probably, I will have to find a buffing wheel. And I can probably make one out of MDF. But first, I will do all these. That's WD-40 or something similar. Sort of tools I started with in 1970. Yeah, and I've polished the flute out. That's pretty good though. Doesn't matter if it's a bit rough underneath, because that's not going to be doing any cutting. Now the shallow gouges like these, they have a very wide range of uses, depending on how you grind it. And although there's this widely held myth that you should never use a spindle gouge on bowls, you can use this kind of gouge on bowls. It's just a question of grinding, putting the right kind of bevel on it. The tools you should not use on bowls are deep fluted spindle gouges. But this one will be just fine. Well, it's looking quite good. I don't even need to do that. Handle fits me nicely. Excellent. So I have the screw chuck on the lathe and a disc of MDF, and I'm just going to take the larger piece off. In fact, not take, just turn it around so I've got the smaller face plates. And shape this up so it fits into the flute of the gouges. I'm using a 1/2 inch spindle gouge for this. And I've got a buffing compound here. Oh, looks nice and shiny. So I want to reshape this handle because it's just a shade big for my hand, and I feel it could look a bit better around there. It goes into the vise and then just knock the ferrule off there. That actually came off pretty easily. So the ferrule's on securely, not loose. So that goes into the chuck, which in this case are the long nosed jaws, and the other end I need to center by eye. I'm going to be using a 1-inch skew chisel, 25mm. And I'm going to leave the hole in the center there in case I need to put it back on the chuck again. So I've got these tools reasonably clean, got most of the rust off as best I can, and the next thing which has to happen is to reshape the ends depending on how I'm going to use these tools. Now this is the deep fluted bowl gouge, the what I would call a 1/2 inch flute. I think Americans probably call them a 5/8. It's pretty much as it would have come from the factory, from Sorby's, and so I'm going to change that more to my kind of asymmetric grind. The spindle gouges, this one too, this is another Sorby. Again, I think probably pretty well as it would have come from the factory. I don't think it's being ground. It looks about the original length, and very much the same length as this. So I'm wondering if the fellow had these tools did any turning at all, except that this has been reshaped a little bit, and he managed to grind this away, so it's got two pronounced corners, and they need to go because they severely limit what you can do with the tool. The nose would cut all right, but this little section here is useless because the point of the tool and the corner here keep the middle bit from cutting. So I go to the grinder and see how to reshape these. This is a 1/2 inch spindle gouge which came out of the handle, and I need to do two things on this. First is to round over the point to make it more of a fingernail grind, and to do that I'm just going to bring the two wings in onto the shoulder and swing the handle around. And so that gives me a flat on the end, and then all I need to do is grind away the flat area, the shiny bit. Now this is an 80 grit wheel just to get the bulk off. This is high-speed steel. It does not matter if you blue the edge a bit, provided you don't quench the tool. Don't dip it in water or anything like that to cool it. Just let it cool naturally. Now, the secret to grinding really is you don't need to push the tool against the wheel. Just rest it against the wheel and let the wheel come onto the tool rather than pushing the tool into the wheel. This is a 1/2 inch spindle gouge, and I want to use it for bowl turning, and for that I've got to have a steeper bevel than I would if it was a detail gouge for working on spindles. So that's got it roughly done, and I'll let that cool down, and then it can go to the finer CBN wheel. This wheel I'm using at the moment is carborundum, just for doing the rough shaping. This really is a small spindle roughing gouge, the kind of thing you'd use maybe for a pen blank. So I don't really need it this shape. I'm going to blunten it quite a bit. Now the carbon steel, which this is, it really is better not to get it blue. Although I must say I've never found it made that much difference when I was actually using them. I'll just come back to that. This just takes time. This is the big old Marples. Probably a 1950s or 1960s tool, and polished up very nicely on the flute. I will grind this as I would a bowl gouge, and because it's certainly strong enough for using inside bowls, although it is officially a kind of spindle gouge. So I'm going to put a slightly longer left wing on, and It'll be an asymmetric grind, a bit steeper on the right. And so that's where I'm going with this, taking a bit more off here. Now, as I was grinding this tool, the handle slid off, which remind me that I need to put a spike on the 1/2-inch spindle gouge. Now the purpose of this is that when this goes into the tool handle, it'll jam into the end grain, stop the tool twisting. And that means that in the long run I can take this tool out when it's worn out and put another tool the same size into that handle. So when it comes to putting the gouge back in its original handle, that can go in there. I want to know roughly where the misalignment is, so that when the tool's, that's it, it's a slight kind of angle there, so I'm going to have the flute lined up with the kind of top of that, and that pushes in, and then to make sure it stays in, you hold the handle and whack the other end with your handmade mallet. But that is not going to come out in a hurry. This is the deep fluted gouge, and slightly burred on the end, so I'm just going to hone that out. A bit of 400 grit. Right, so the bevel heel comes onto the grinder first. Put the tool forward. Now I'm not going to get sparks over the top here. I've got to watch the colour of the edge changing, which you'll see as I come around, I hope. And I go up the wheel rather than swing the tool around here, because if I swing the tool around, it's very easy to get that left wing flat, straight. Didn't quite get it round in the end there. Okay, it's very nice to have a single flashing bevel all the way around, but I don't often get it. I'm not too worried by all these little facets, provided I've got a single facet for at least 2 or 3 millimeters from the edge. And if I can feel a little burr, I know that's going to cut really well. And the same with the spindle gouge. Didn't quite get it up here. And that will cut just fine. You'll see it in another video on using spindle gouges. The only grinder I have with an aluminium oxide wheel on, which is what I have to grind the carbon tools on, is a 6-inch grinder with a pretty old wheel which I think is done under 5-inch diameter. Now if I have a single bevel off that wheel, the edge is far too fragile, so I'm basically going to have a 2 bevel on here, 2 bevels. I'll do the bottom one first. And this one can be, the lower part can match the curve on the wheel. Actually, it doesn't look too fragile at the moment. I need to hone that off. And then I can raise the handle very slightly and put a secondary bevel on, slightly steeper. And that will cut just fine. So I've ended up with a good full-length Sorby bowl gouge, deep fluted bowl gouge, 1/2-inch flute. I've got 2 Sorby spindle gouges which I'm going to use in a video about what you can do with a 1/2-inch spindle gouge. I've got the little marples tool which I'll use for roughing down small center work. There's a Sorby parting tool which I don't really need at all. It's straight, and I prefer tapered parting tools, and I've got several other ones anyway. So this will probably end up as a small scraper for doing very small end grain jobs, and I think I needed one the other day and didn't have one. So this will become round, and on the handle which detached itself, this tool clearly needs a new handle. So if I'm going to use it for bowls, I will put on a handle probably 18 inches long or so. It's about 420 mil. And that will become a very nice bowl gouge.